The email notification appeared on my screen at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't see it. I'd been working late again, nothing unusual for me, reviewing a licensing proposal that my legal team had flagged as needing my attention before morning. The office was quiet. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. The cleaning staff had already come and gone. It was just me, the hum of the ventilation system, and the soft glow of 3 monitors arranged in a half circle around my desk on the 32nd floor of a building in downtown Toronto. I set down my coffee and read my mother's message. Nadia, your brother's fiancé comes from a very prominent family. The Whitfields are well-connected people. Her father sits on the boards of 2 major firms, and her mother chairs a hospital foundation. We are having an engagement dinner on Saturday at the Fairmont. It would be better if you didn't come. You understand how these things are. We don't want anyone asking awkward questions about what you do. Just stay home. We'll celebrate with you separately another time. I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on my desk and went back to the licensing proposal. I typed one reply before I turned off the light that night. Okay, Mom. I drove home in my 7-year-old Civic, parked in the underground of my condo building, and made myself a bowl of oatmeal because it was nearly 1 in the morning and that was the easiest thing. I sat at my kitchen island and stared at the skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows and thought about a lot of things. I thought about the licensing proposal. I thought about the meeting I had on Thursday that I hadn't told anyone in my family about. I thought about my brother, Declan, who was 29 and getting married to a woman named Portia Whitfield, and how he hadn't called to tell me himself about the dinner he'd let our mother send the message. I didn't cry. I want to be honest about that because I think people expect that part of the story, and I'm not going to manufacture it. What I felt was quieter than sadness. It was the particular exhaustion that comes from realizing that something you hoped might change has simply stayed the same. I have been the odd one in my family for as long as I can remember. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, the younger of 2 children. My parents are both accomplished people. In the conventional sense, my father spent 30 years as a civil engineer with a firm that built infrastructure across the province, and my mother has spent the last 2 decades as a school board trustee and community fixture. They valued things that were legible, careers with titles, salaries that came with benefits packages and pension plans, rooms where the work you did could be explained to a stranger at a dinner party without watching their eyes glaze over. I was good at school, but not in the ways that translated. I didn't want to be a doctor, or a lawyer, or an engineer. I was interested in systems, the way things connected to each other, the way inefficiencies in large organizations created invisible costs that nobody was tracking. I studied computer science at Waterloo, and then spent 2 years working in logistics consulting before I started to see something that I couldn't unsee. The supply chain infrastructure for mid-sized Canadian manufacturers was, in many cases, genuinely broken. Not slightly suboptimal. Broken. And nobody had built software that actually addressed the specific constraints of the Canadian market, the cross-border complexity, the seasonal disruption patterns, the unique relationship between domestic production and American demand cycles. So I left my job at 26 and started building something. I didn't tell my family what I was doing. Not really. My mother asked once, early on, and I said I was working on a software project. She nodded in the way that people nod when they've decided not to invest further in a topic. My father said he hoped I had savings. Declan, who was finishing his MBA at the time and had recently started dating Portia, said that entrepreneurship was very high risk in a tone that suggested he was quoting a textbook. I didn't argue with any of them. I just worked. The first 2 years were genuinely hard. I'm not romanticizing that difficulty. There was a period of about 8 months when I was paying myself almost nothing, when I subsisted on grocery store rotisserie chickens and the knowledge that my burn rate was low enough to give me another 6 months of runway. I had 3 clients, then 7, then 19. I hired my first employee, a developer named Rashida, who is now my VP of engineering, and one of the best people I have ever worked with. By the time I was 29, we had 63 employees. By the time I turned 31, we had over 200. By 33, which is how old I am now, Meridian Supply Co. employs 412 people across offices in Toronto, Calgary, and Vancouver, with a satellite team in Montreal. We manage supply chain optimization for some of the largest manufacturers in the country. 3 months ago, I completed a Series C funding round that valued the company at just over $400 million. I did not tell my family any of this. That probably needs some explanation, and I've thought about how to explain it honestly, without making myself sound either saintly or strategic, because I was neither. The truth is that somewhere around year 2, when I came home for Thanksgiving and my mother introduced me to her book club friends as my daughter Nadia, she's between things right now, I made a decision that was mostly self-protective. I decided that what I was building was mine, that I didn't want my family's skepticism in the room with me when I was still fragile enough for it to do damage. And then, later, when the company started to become something real, I found that I had built a wall that was difficult to take down without explaining why I'd built it in the first place. And then later still, and this is the part I'm least proud of, I wondered whether I wanted to take it down at all, because I had started to understand something about how my family worked. They didn't love conditionally in any dramatic or cruel sense. They were not villains, but they organized their world around visible markers of status, and in that world, I had been invisible. And I wanted to know who they were when I was invisible. I wanted to know what I actually meant to them when I appeared to have nothing to offer. My brother's engagement dinner told me something about that. Saturday came and went. I ordered Thai food, worked through a partnership deck that needed revisions, and went to bed early. On Sunday, my mother sent a follow-up message saying the dinner had gone wonderfully and that Portia's family was exactly as impressive as you'd expect. She said we'd find a time to celebrate with me soon. She didn't ask how my weekend was. Declan didn't message at all. I want to tell you about Thursday, because Thursday is where this story actually turns. Whitfield Capital Group is one of the older private investment and holdings firms in Ontario. They manage assets across real estate, infrastructure, and increasingly, technology. Portia's father, Gerald Whitfield, is the CEO. He's in his early 60s, known in business circles as precise and somewhat formal, a man who researches everything thoroughly before committing to anything. His firm had been exploring a move into supply chain technology investment for about 18 months. My director of business development had been in quiet conversations with their team for 6 of those months. On Thursday morning at 9 a.m., Gerald Whitfield was scheduled to come to our offices for an initial meeting about a potential partnership. I knew who he was. Of course I did. I had done full due diligence on Whitfield Capital the moment their team first reached out. I knew he was Portia's father. I knew Portia was marrying my brother. I had kept this information in a separate compartment in my mind because it was genuinely separate. The business conversation was a business conversation, and whether it proceeded had nothing to do with my family. I did not tell my business development team about the personal connection. I told myself this was because it was irrelevant. I'm still not entirely sure that's true. I was already in the boardroom when Gerald Whitfield arrived with 2 members of his team. I stood to greet him. He was tall and dressed in a way that communicated old money understated, precisely fitted, no visible effort. He shook my hand with the kind of firmness that people practice. "Miss Okonkwo," he said. "Thank you for making the time." "Of course," I said. "Please sit down." He did. And then he looked at me, and I watched the very specific process of a person cross-referencing what they're seeing against what they expected to see. I am 33 years old. I have my mother's face and my father's posture, and I know that I do not look like what people picture when they hear the word CEO. I've spent my entire career watching people recalibrate in the first 30 seconds of meeting me. Gerald Whitfield recalibrated. I gave him the moment. Then, I opened the meeting. I had prepared for this conversation the way I prepare for everything thoroughly and without performing it. I walked him through Meridian's platform architecture, our client retention data, our expansion model, our proprietary forecasting methodology. I answered his questions directly. When one of his associates raised a skeptical point about integration timelines, I had Rashida present 3 case studies with real numbers. The room shifted about 40 minutes in that particular shift, where skepticism becomes genuine interest, and people lean forward slightly without noticing. Gerald Whitfield noticed. He was watching me the way someone watches a chess player mid-game. We broke for coffee around the 90-minute mark. I stepped away briefly to take a message from my assistant, and when I came back, I found Gerald Whitfield standing in front of the wall near the entrance to the boardroom where we keep several framed pieces, a few design awards, a partnership announcement, and one item that my communications team had insisted on displaying, despite my initial reluctance. A framed copy of a magazine cover from 8 months ago, a national business publication. My face. A headline about Canadian tech founders reshaping traditional industries. He was looking at it when I walked in. I watched him look at it. I watched him look at my name on the cover. I watched the stillness that came over him, not shock exactly, but something slower and more complicated than shock. The particular stillness of a person reconstructing a timeline. He turned when he heard me behind him. "Miss Okonkwo," he said. And then he stopped. "Yes," I said. "Are you—" He paused again. "Declan Okonkwo's sister." "I am." He was quiet for a moment. His two associates were on the other side of the room, looking at their phones. He kept his voice low. "You were supposed to be at the engagement dinner last Saturday." "I wasn't able to make it," I said. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face during the entire 90 minutes of the business meeting, something that was, I think, the beginning of embarrassment. "Your mother told my wife that you were—" He stopped himself. "That I was what?" I asked. I kept my voice pleasant. I was curious, not angry. I genuinely wanted to know what my mother had said. He cleared his throat. "That you were going through a difficult period. Career-wise." I nodded slowly. "I see," Portia mentioned. He stopped again. "We had the impression that you were—" Another pause. "This is quite a company, Miss Okonkwo." "Thank you," I said. "Should we go back in?" We finished the meeting. It went well. Gerald Whitfield's team requested a follow-up session the following week, which my business development director told me afterward was very positive signal. I shook hands with everyone and walked them to the elevator. When the doors closed, I stood in the hallway for a moment by myself. Then I went back to my office and got to work. My phone rang at 4:30. It was a number I didn't recognize, and normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. "Nadia." It was Gerald Whitfield. He had gotten my direct number from someone on his team. "I hope this isn't an intrusion." "Not at all," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "I've spent the last 3 hours thinking about what my wife and I contributed to." He paused carefully. "To the situation regarding Saturday's dinner. We had certain expectations about the guest list that were communicated to your parents. Expectations that I now understand were based on significantly incomplete information." He cleared his throat. "Portia doesn't know. I haven't spoken to her yet. But I intend to." "Mr. Whitfield," I said, "you don't owe me an apology. You had information and you acted on it. That's what people do." "The information was wrong," he said. "Yes," I said. "It was." Another pause. "For what it's worth, and I recognize it may not be worth a great deal, I think you've built something extraordinary here. I hope we have the opportunity to work together." "I'm open to that," I said. "I'll have my team send over the follow-up materials Monday morning." We said goodbye and hung up. My mother called that evening. I was on the highway, driving home, and her name appeared on the car screen. I let it ring. She called again 20 minutes later. I let that one ring too. I wasn't ready yet. Not because I was upset, or not only because of that, but because I needed to know what I wanted to say before I said it. I've spent too much of my life reacting to my family's framing of who I am, and I had decided some time ago that I would stop doing that. She left a voicemail. Her voice was different from usual, quieter, slightly careful in a way that told me Gerald Whitfield had already spoken to someone. "Nadia, it's Mom. I was hoping we could talk. Give me a call when you have a chance." Declan called the next morning. He also left a voicemail. "Hey, it's me." I've been talking to Portia, and she talked to her dad, and there's apparently I didn't know what mom said to them, Nadia. I want you to know that. Can we get together? I want to explain. I sat with both voicemails for 2 days. I want to be honest about the 2 days because I think they're important. I was not planning a response. I was not crafting something clever. I was genuinely trying to understand what I wanted. Because here is the thing that nobody tells you about being in this position, the position of having information that redistributes power in a relationship, and it is this. The power doesn't actually feel good. It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like standing in a room full of people who are suddenly looking at you differently, and wondering whether any of the looking is actually about you, or whether it's all just about the thing you've built. I called my mother back on Sunday afternoon. She answered on the first ring. Nadia. Her voice was careful in a way I hadn't heard from her very often. Thank you for calling. Hi, Mom. A pause. Gerald Whitfield called your father. I figured he might. Another pause. Why didn't you tell us? And her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and I wasn't expecting that, and I had to take a breath. Because I needed to build it first, I said. And I couldn't do that with everyone's opinions in the room. We wouldn't have. Mom. I said it gently. Do you remember Thanksgiving 2 years after I left consulting? You introduced me to your book club friends. Silence. You said I was between things. More silence. I wasn't between things, I said. I had 11 employees and a client list and a product that was working, but you didn't know that because you hadn't asked. And when you introduced me, you assumed. And that was really clarifying, actually. It told me something I needed to know. Nadia, I'm sorry. And she sounded it. She sounded genuinely sorry in a way that made everything more complicated, not less. I didn't realize. I know you didn't. The dinner. I know, Mom. We thought Portia's family we didn't want. She stopped. Started again. We were ashamed of how it might look. And that was wrong. That was deeply wrong. You are our daughter, and we should never have. Her voice broke more fully this time. I'm so sorry, Nadia. I closed my eyes. I know. Is there any way? I'm not ready to talk about all of it yet, I said. But I'm not closing the door. I just need some time. We talked for another few minutes. Not about the big things, just the ordinary things, the small facts of each other's lives. The kind of conversation that is really just two people re-establishing that they can still be in the same space without it collapsing. When I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with my tea and looked at the skyline for a long time. Declan came by my office the following Tuesday. He didn't call ahead, he just showed up at the front desk and asked if I was available. My assistant buzzed me and I said yes, send him up. He walked into my office and stopped. I watched him take in the room, the windows, the view, the team visible through the glass walls, the controlled hum of a company at work. He looked at me across my desk the way you look at someone when you realize you've been holding a picture of them that is years out of date. Hey, he said. Hey, I said. Sit down. He sat. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well. He's 2 years older than me, and he's always had our mother's expressive face. Everything he's feeling moves across it in real time. What I saw moving across it now was complicated. I didn't know what Mom told them, he said. About you. I didn't know she said you were struggling. I didn't even know she'd decided you shouldn't come until after it happened. Did you try to find out why I wasn't there? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. Not right away. I appreciated the honesty. Okay. I should have called you, he said. I should have called you to tell you about the dinner myself, first, before Mom messaged you. I've been letting her manage the family stuff, and that's not an excuse, it's just what happened, and it shouldn't have. He looked at his hands. And the fact that I just found out you run a company with hundreds of employees, that's worth that you built this whole thing, and I didn't know because I never asked. He looked up. That's on me, Nadia. That's not about Mom or the Whitfields or any of that. I never asked about your life because I had already decided what the answer was going to be. Of everything that was said in all those conversations, that was the sentence that hit the hardest. Not because it was the cruelest, it wasn't. It was the most honest. My brother, who is many things, is capable of honesty when he decides to try it. I know, I said. I'm sorry. I know. Portia wants to meet you, he said. Properly. She's embarrassed about her father's role in all of this, though I've told her it was more complicated than just him. She's actually really good, Nadia. I think you'd like her. I probably would, I said. I'm willing to try. He almost smiled. Yeah? Yeah, I said. But Declan, I need you to hear this. Going forward, I need to be your sister in full. Not the version that's easier to manage. Not the version that fits into a dinner party narrative. The actual version. Can you do that? He nodded. Yes, he said. I can do that. I believed him. Not completely. Not all at once belief is something you extend in increments when it's been withdrawn for a long time. But enough. Enough to be a beginning. The partnership with Whitfield Capital Group proceeded to a second meeting, and then a third, and is now in formal due diligence. Gerald Whitfield and I have had 2 more conversations. They have been entirely professional. There is a formality between us that I think we both understand is necessary. We are building toward a business relationship while carrying the weight of a personal context that neither of us fully knows how to address. He was gracious and thorough. I was direct and fair. At the end of our last meeting, as his team was packing up their materials, he paused at the door. Portia says she's looking forward to meeting you, he said. Declan mentioned. I said, tell her likewise. He nodded. And then he said, very quietly, I misjudged the situation considerably. You had bad information, I said. I could have gotten better information, he said. That's on me. I thought about Declan saying almost exactly the same thing in this same room 2 weeks earlier. Yes, I said. It is. He left. I went back to work. Here is what I want to say. At the end of all of this, not to my family, not to Gerald Whitfield, but to anyone who recognizes something in this story, I did not hide my success to punish my family. I want to be clear about that because I think it would be easy to read this as a revenge story, and it's more complicated than that. I kept my life private because I needed to protect the version of myself that was still being built. And I kept it private longer than I should have because part of me was afraid of what I'd learn about how my family saw me, and then, when I started to learn it anyway, I think I was also afraid of what I'd have to do with that knowledge. The uncomfortable truth is this. My family's behavior didn't change because they grew. It changed because external circumstances forced a reckoning. And that's not the same thing as change not yet. Change is what comes after the reckoning. In the daily choices, in the phone calls that happen without a reason, in the questions people ask when there's nothing to gain from asking them. I'm watching for that. I'm willing to watch for it. What I know with certainty is this. Your worth is not a number in a valuation report. It is not your title or your address or the family you married into or the school you attended. Those things are real in the world, they carry weight in rooms, they open and close doors, but they are not the measure of a person. The people in your life who only see you clearly once you've accumulated enough visible proof of your value were never actually seeing you. They were seeing the space where you stood, waiting for something more legible to appear. You do not have to wait to be legible. You do not have to shrink yourself in the meantime. You do not have to explain or justify or diminish what you're building just because the people around you aren't capable of recognizing it yet. Build anyway. Work in the quiet. Know what you're doing even when no one else does. And when the moment comes, and it may come where the people who dismissed you are finally looking at you clearly, you will get to decide what that moment means. Not them, you. That is the only revenge worth having.